things on the wall get painted over all the time.
Yeah.
And we agonize over those slogans on the wall, right? We agonize over those things. At the end of the day, it means less than how do you treat that person that's walking by the hallway to you. You don't coach the team you wish you had, you coach the team you have. And some have better skills. Not everybody gets Michael Jordan on their team, and it's how do you make the most of what you have and build on those skills.
Welcome to IDD Leader, where human services leaders grow their impact, lead with heart, and build the workplaces our field deserves. I'm your host, Nate Beers. Let's dive in. If you're a leader, there's probably something in you that deeply knows, I need to help take my team somewhere we've never been before. You can see the destination, at least in part, well before you've gotten there. And if you're going to go somewhere you've never been before, there's often not a clear roadmap, because at some point you reach the end of what you've already known. And I don't actually mean that you've reached the end of your road, because that's a metaphor for dying or retiring or something like that. That's not what I'm suggesting here. Okay, hopefully this will actually land a little better than it started. What I'm trying to say is, why not learn from someone that has a ton of experience and wisdom? In fact, let's do that right now. My guest today is John Dickerson. He is the CEO or the founder of Quillo and also the host of Quillo podcast. This is part 2 of my conversation with him. If you want to catch part 1 first, you can, but you can also just jump in right here. This episode is like a masterclass in leadership and in connecting with the people that you lead. Wow, what a vital skill. And John is a great storyteller. You're going to enjoy that, but you're going to hear a lot of little practical, tactical ways that you can apply this principle of building relationships or having a person-centered workplace. Anyhow, without further ado, enjoy today's conversation.
What can we do that creates change, that changes this culture from one of compliance to one that is based on success, joy, and having friends that make life meaningful for folks?
Yeah. So if we've got, let's suppose we have an executive director or HR director that's listening right now, and they're leaning in. They're deeply resonating. This is not a new idea, I'm sure, for them. They're probably already actively trying to do these kinds of things at their organization. What are some kind of immediate types of action steps that you see that help organizations or have helped organizations move the needle forward on this one?
Changing culture is really, really hard. It's really hard. You may have something that's been built up that's very patriarchal or matriarchal for decades. And now you're saying, we want to let people explore. We want to do things differently. The research shows how we change people's mind about culture is telling success stories. Showing people that are doing well. When you talk to the people at CORE, I'm sure they talk to you about Carl or Maria or stories of people that have transcended who they were to who they are today. And the more you tell those stories, it's like when in Indiana, when I was with the ARC, we closed 5 state institutions. And we didn't walk up and just say, we're padlocking the door, everybody's going to a new institution. We said, how do we do this in a person-centered way? And I remember our very first one was Newcastle State Developmental Center. There was supposed to be this positive meeting, and some of the staff leaked it out. So we had 4 people in a gym wanting to have a lynch party. And this man I'm a big guy, I'm about 6'4" and 300 pounds. And this guy was probably about 5'8", 170 pounds, and he was 70 years old, and said, I want to take you out in the parking lot because I'm going to kick your ass. Robert will never make it in the community. He's been kicked out of every program he's been in. And I want to go out in the parking lot. We're going to talk this over. And I said, sir, I ain't going out in the parking lot with you because I know you will kick my ass because you're mad. But let's talk about Robert. And a year later, we had Robert moving into a duplex that was 8 blocks from where his parents lived instead of 3 hours away. He would walk around the institution clutching his collection of action figures. And all the behavior consultants said he's obsessed with the action figures. He wasn't obsessed with them. Whenever he left him in his room, people stole them.
Yeah.
And so he wasn't a hoarder obsessed with these. He was worried about losing his things. Once he
Yeah.
got in his own room and could leave those where nobody took them, he never carried them around again. That same dad that was going to take me to the parking lot and kick my butt um, wrote me the most wonderful card. He said, "We live 8 blocks away, and it's 2 blocks from an ice cream stand. So we can drive over and walk to the ice cream stand with Robert, have ice cream, and walk back home. That's the best thing we've ever done." And we convince them by showing stories of people with success. So that exec that wants to do this, I wouldn't do it by preaching to your people alone. You gotta believe, you gotta be consistent. They gotta believe it's not the next shiny thing that you've seen and you're gonna change direction in 6 months.
Sure.
But they want to be part of it. What DSPs told us in a recent group of focus groups, we get the idea. We want to help people have jobs. We want them to be more independent, but nobody ever talks to us about it. We're never in the team meetings. We have people that are strangers to our folks making decisions about their lives. And yes, they're in those meetings, but they're often told the person with a disability is, they say to you, "Nate, what do you feel about these goals? What do you want to happen?" And your only goal is to get the hell out of that meeting,
That
because
yes.
everybody's talking about you
Yeah,
and what we're doing.
it's yeah, absolutely. If you ask a DSP that's on a truly great team, what makes them stay? What do you think they would say? What does that feeling look or sound like in their daily work?
We just interesting question. We just completed 3 focus groups with DSPs, one on the East Coast, one in the Midwest, some rural folks, and one out in the Chicago area. And it was remarkably similar. They said, what keeps them coming back? And we asked people that had been there at least a year, because there's a lot of study about why people leave. We wanted to know why people stay. And what they said, it's the relationship with the people they support. And so how do we build that? And how do we recognize that and support that and do it in a way that my friend John Raphael talks about people, DSPs will often say, "These are my people." Well, they aren't your people. They're the folks you support. They can be friends, but they're not. When you say my people, it's kind of a possessive. Um, and he said, what you want is people that you support and you recognize as friends and you help them grow and develop. And I think when they stay because the relationship, and you know this from your work, if somebody says they have a 48% turnover rate, they don't lose half their staff every year. They lose about 20% of their staff 2.5 times a year. It's the churn that goes on
Yeah.
in one subset. And one of the folks that we were talking to that was looking at this, and they realized that one of the real problems was a leader in one particular area of their agency, but he'd been there a long time and nobody wanted to get rid of him, but he had the highest turnover of anybody in there. And I said, "Have you ever sat down with him and asked him?" And he'll probably tell you it's the people that we're hiring. And how do you get them to see? It's like being a coach. Um, you don't coach the team you wish you had, you coach the team you have. And some have better skills. Not everybody gets Michael Jordan on their team, and it's how do you make the most of what you have and build on those skills? Um, the other thing they told us is they'd like to be more engaged with the agency. They didn't feel connected with the agency because they don't see themselves as this integral part of the organization. So how do we make people feel more connected? That's a lot of what we do through Quillo that, if you're the CEO and you have a chance to talk to your staff, what would you say to them in a minute or 2 minutes? And I once had a CEO said, "I don't know what I'd say to them." And I said, "What if it was you knew that it was the day before they were going to decide they're going to quit?" Well, I tell them how valuable they are, how I need to listen to them, how we need to find ways to learn from them. I said, "There's your message."
Yeah.
And he started an idea that I thought was very cool. Um, he had 400 staff, and he said, there's 200 working days in a year. I want 4 names on my desk every day of one of our DSPs, 4 DSPs, their cell phone number and where they work. And I'm going to call all of them. I can make 4 calls a day. And, he called him up and said, hey, this is Nate Beers, CEO of ABC Center. And the first response was, who? Second response is, am I in trouble?
Absolutely. That kind of registers like in the brainstem, like the amygdala's definitely triggered. Hey,
That's right.
something's
And
wrong.
he said, you're not in trouble at all. I just want to hear from you. So I'm just calling to say, what can we do to make your job better? And he'd get to about half of them, and some called back, some didn't call back, some left a message, and he just kept working on this. And what he found out is word got around the agency that the boss wanted to hear from folks. And that changed everything. So it's not just making pronouncements on high that we're going to do all these changes, but what is it we could do? How do we learn from our people in the front lines? Transportation's a huge problem. What could we do to solve transportation issues? What could we do to figure that out? Um, we have a lot, from spending time with DSPs, we have a lot of really wonderful people that are really, really smart that work as DSPs.
Absolutely.
And how do we channel that into creativity? I have a friend of mine who doesn't want to be quoted because he'll be run out of rails by his fellow executive directors. And he said, we have this trend in this country of agencies getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Both the venture capitalist driven folks that are, buying up other organizations, as well as nonprofits that are getting bigger. And he said, my goal is not to do that. My goal is to find some of our best DSPs, nurture them, not just to be leaders in our company, but how do they go out and create a nimble, creative, new company of their own that we can support them to do something really cool with 25 people? Because we're never going to beat the giants at getting bigger. They're really good at billing. They're really good at doing things in mass, right? That's what
Yeah.
they're good at. They're not good at being nimble, and they're not good at being responsive to people in some new and different ways. So he looks at his people and say, who are the best people that would really like to do something radically different, and how could we support them in doing that? And so I think the transformation, long answers to your short question. If I was a CEO, I would try to start a lot of little interesting backyard conversations and just say, where do you think you'd like to be? I often asked training directors or HR directors when they do a class, who is the person in that class that's a future rock star for your organization? And they've never been asked that question.
Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about is developing people. It's investing,
Exactly.
it's believing in them, valuing them, believing in them, and investing in them.
Absolutely. And, thinking about them and their development, and again, it's what we try to do with Quillo, but I hate employee of the year or employee of the month programs. So if you have 150 employees in your agency, Nate, and you pick one, that means you have one winner and 149 losers. And I once went to a very large national multi-state company and was on their wall. They had these employees of the year. And they sent them to Anchor, and they did all kinds of cool things. And they had little baseball card size pictures of them in frames up on the wall, hundreds of them. So they've been doing that for many years. And I said, how many of those people are still with you? And there was silence. And they said, we've never asked that question. And I said, employee of the year, I think is kind of like this crazy thing that we do. We should be capturing cool things that every employee is doing all the time and praising that and modeling. We suggest people, you find something somebody's doing cool, film it for 30 seconds on your phone and just say, "Hey, here's what Nate did that is very cool. And here's how we were out, and we actually have this in a video. We were out ordering at Burger King, and the guy behind the counter turned to the staff and said, 'What would he like to eat?' Ignored the young man with the disability, turned to the staff and said, 'What we'd like to eat.' And the staff member said, 'Beats the hell out of me. You better ask him.' And it was this beautiful moment. And so the supervisor recorded that. Here's what happened. And not to put the guy from Burger King on the spot, but the young man with the disability was so used to everybody ordering for him, he just immediately shied behind the staff member and said, 'Whatever you want is good.' 'No, what do you want? Do you want pickles?
Yeah.
You want ketchup? You want mustard? What do you want? Do you want fries? Do you want curly fries? What is it? What is it you'd like here?' And this idea, something as simple as letting people pick what they want to eat is pretty profound. One of my great mentors was a young woman who was president of SABE, self-advocate leader, and um, she got to meet a president one time. I've never met a president. She got to meet President Obama and Vice President Biden, and she would say to me that uh, we ask people what they want in their life, where do they want to work, where they want to live, when we don't let them pick the toothpaste they use in the morning.
Wow. Hmm.
I
Wow.
mean,
That's really profound.
it is. And she's saying, you come to
Wow.
this meeting and say, "Nate, what do you want in your life? Where do you want to live?" I want to get the hell out of this meeting.
And I want
Yeah.
Crest or
Yeah.
Colgate.
Write down whatever you want.
Exactly.
I don't care. We did a focus group in Wisconsin, and I asked folks, "What do you think about your annual plan meeting?" They said, "We hate that, because the first half of the meeting, we're answering all these questions of what we can't do so we don't lose our waiver funding. Then the second half of the meeting, they say, 'Nate, now it's time to dream about your life and where you want to be.' And I've just spent 30 minutes documenting everything you can't do."
Quick announcement. If you're an executive or an HR director at a human services agency and you want a stronger, more stable workforce, I want to invite you to a new series of free live sessions designed just for you. I'm collaborating with the Institute on Community Integration from the University of Minnesota, and we're launching the Direct Support Leadership Lens Strategies for a Stronger Workforce series. These are practical, interactive, and they're anchored in that, yeah, we've already tried everything to fix it feeling that many leaders experience. You can get the whole scoop and register. Just click the top banner at iddleader.com.
So
Yeah.
if I asked you, "Nate, do you think you could play second base for the Pittsburgh Pirates?"
Uh,
Probably not.
I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, but we give people these choices of, what do you want to do with your life, and instead of helping them explore, Betty Williams was her name, and she said, what we should do is just drive around town and look at places and say, and she was a real believer in small digital cameras, said, take pictures of places you'd like to work or people you'd like to work with, and let's start there. And it reminds me of a story that came out of a Quillo video where we talked about, what is really important to you about where you work? And this mom called me up and said, this started a whole conversation with my daughter because I kept looking at her skills. So I knew she could stand all day. She's physically fit. So she could do all kinds of jobs that were physical. I knew that she could count. I knew she could read. I knew she could follow direction. So I kept throwing out ideas. What about this? What about this? What about this? She didn't like any of it. Finally, after about 45 minutes of conversation, mother was getting frustrated. And the daughter said, I want to work with nice people. Everybody judges me. I want to work with people that don't judge me. Now, how often does a job coach have time to dive into that and say, are these nice people that we're putting this person to work here?
Absolutely. Wow.
And so, I was challenged by a dad one time. He was looking at Quillo and he ran a workshop in Missouri and was a big champion of sheltered workshop. I don't hate sheltered workshops. Um, I think they limit people, but I don't hate them. And anyway, he said, well, we tried finding jobs for my son 3 different times. He failed at each one. I said, really? And this was at a board meeting for an organization of executive directors nationally. And he's kind of put me on the spot. And I said, I don't know your son. I can't really speak to him personally, but tell me a little bit. And what were the jobs you tried? Well, we got him a job at McDonald's. And 6 months later, he quit. I said, okay, what was the next one? Well, we got him a job at Wendy's. And he stayed 6 months and then he quit. I said, okay, what was the third one? Well, we got him a job stocking shelves in the grocery store, and he liked it for a while, but he worked from 7 o'clock at night till midnight, and he didn't like the hours. I said, okay. I said, so let's talk about the first two in fast food. I said, what's the turnover in McDonald's and Wendy's for staff, would you guess? He said, I have no idea. I said, well, I've studied it. It's about 400% a year. The average person lasts about 3 months. It's hard. It's fast paced. It's tough. You sometimes have nasty people coming through the drive through, and the average person lasts 3 months. Your son lasted twice as long as most people
That's
did.
the average. Yeah.
I don't think he's a failure. He stuck it out longer than most people. Same thing with Wendy's. And then you got him a job at night. And does he like being around people? Well, yes, he loves being around people. So the people I know that are successful at stocking, I have a young friend with autism. He loves stocking shelves at night because he gets everything orderly and neat, and then he leaves. And he's all pissed off the next day because it's not
It's
orderly
a
and neat
all
anymore.
his work got undone by the
So he
customers all
does it
day.
over again.
Yeah.
But your son doesn't sound like him. So maybe we need to find out what he'd really love to do. Well, the workshop is safe and it's secure. And so we went to a position of, when you can't push rope up a hill. And so whenever he's ready sometime, maybe they'll think about it a little bit differently. And what we try to do with Quill is show people working in a lot of different jobs. We have a young man who's a professional magician who was told because of his autism he was going to have to go to a sheltered workshop. He's now performed with Penn and Teller. He drives his own car all around the country and does magic shows where he talks about autism. And he said, I conquered my autism by using magic to tell people stories. And his name's Cody Clark. Cody Clark Magic. People can find him on the internet. And he'll do a thing for a library or an elementary school or a professional gig at a magic show. It's all about using magic to help people understand the potential of folks. And there's a whole movement now of an organization that is just helping people with disabilities become entrepreneurs, start a small business and figure out what that is. And yes, they may fail. Over half of all businesses fail in the first 2 years. And so, but if you're driven to do it, maybe this is what'll be successful for you. And you figure out how to do that. So we tell stories about people that have their own business or they're doing something that nobody ever thought possible before. Tell stories about thinking about behavior different. We have a um, story about a young man that we call Why Did He Run? This true story that I was called in on a case where a young man would run away from the group home. Door would open a crack, he's gone. So much so that they put a second belt on him. So first belt was around his pants. The second belt was like a loop in the back. So they had something to grab onto him when he took off running. And he was also a non-speaker. And we tell this much shorter, so I'll give you the longer version. But anyway, we're
Okay.
talking and said he can't speak. So he can't, there's 3 reasons. He's running away because he doesn't want to be here. He's running to someplace because he really wants to be somewhere else. Or he just needs to run. He didn't seem to have any problems with the other two guys in the apartment. So we said, why don't we take him to the junior high school? They have a track that has a fence around it. It's all enclosed. And said, let's see if he just wants to run. Took him out there. 2.5 miles later, he stopped running.
Wow.
I said, so our goal is we need to find somebody in the neighborhood that runs and wants a running buddy. None of the staff ran. So they said, where do we find runners? I said, go to the Y, look for a runners club. Sit out in the front yard in the morning and the evening, see if you see
Just
anybody
just
jogging.
see who's coming through the neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's actually how they met a guy.
Wow.
And they got to know each other. They started running together 5 nights a week. And all of a sudden, he's invited to their house for holidays. And so how do we turn something that's seen as a negative into a positive? So we tell the story about why does he run? And he just needed to run. And figuring that out is such a key. And so how do we listen better? A friend of mine always tells me, he said, John, people need to, and we actually did a video on this. Peter Leidy is a great trainer. If you haven't used him, he's out of Wisconsin. He's a wonderful trainer. Uses music and humor and all kinds of things. But he had a young lady named Christine that did a video with us. And Christine talks about, you have to quit listening to me with your ears and start listening with your heart. I mean, that's pretty
That's
profound.
that's a profound quote. It absolutely is.
And it gets into this mindset, and what we find with DSPs that was really encouraging is that 42% said if they spend at least 10 to 15 minutes a week, which is, watching 10 videos, um, they 42% said it improved the relationship with their supervisor. They found things to talk about in these videos. Um, And the thing that helped we love the most is 72% said it improves the relationship with the people they served.
Yeah.
And so how do we change culture, whether it's using Quillo or some other tool? We've got to change how we communicate with one another, how we support one another. How do we make those phone calls that how we doing here and be honest about what you want to do.
Yeah.
One of the things that Dick did, the fellow that made the phone calls, he made lists. And he shared it with his leadership team and said, this is what they're telling me. What are we doing to do what they're asking? Well, it's not feasible to do that. That's not what I asked you. What are we doing to change this?
Yeah.
And it took time for people to do that and figure out how to make that happen. And this is the thing, one of my great mentors said, it takes years to build a culture, a positive culture. You can destroy it in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So, um, one agency that I knew they had a Thanksgiving tradition, and every Thanksgiving, the Saturday before Thanksgiving, they had a big refrigerated semi come in, and they had over 1,000 staff in the Chicago area. And all day Saturday, management was there, and everybody got a 20-pound turkey or a 20-pound ham, their choice. And all the management teams there handing them out, talking to people, chatting with folks. What are you making this Thanksgiving? How are things going? And it was an all-day affair. Everybody loved it. And you came and got your turkey or ham for Thursday. And this was great. So somebody in a team meeting, a leadership meeting decided, that's a lot of time we have to spend on Saturday. And, we could make it easier for them. What if with their paycheck, we just did a coupon for Kroger for, $30 for a turkey or a ham, and then go get whatever they want. And they decide, well, that sounds easy. Maybe it's people don't like coming on Saturday. People were furious. It wasn't about getting the
No.
ham or the turkey. It was the time
It was
spent.
yeah, the experience and the
Exactly.
connection
And
there.
they tried to reinstate it, and only about a third of the people came. They were pissed. And so they had to work back in that confidence and trust. So a stupid decision, somebody should have said, no, what's important here is they like us being with them and we like them. And so when we think about this, the more we can give people support, and to our executive directors and leaders, I think they have to find some people of common minds that are also trying to change, because it's pretty lonely to be the one at the top saying we want to change. How do you find a support group of your peers that you can brainstorm ideas about? How can you find a group that you can coach one another when you're threatened to, your whole leadership team is saying, "To hell with this, you're crazy. We can't
Yeah.
shut the workshop, or we can't move from a 8-bed group home model. Do you know we make money on 8-bed group homes? It's the only thing we do make money on." Um, and so you say, "Well, what is it? What is it we can do that's different?" And we're going to have to come up with new models that spend less for some, spend more on others. We're going to have to figure out this workforce shortage. Um, One of the trainings I'm doing in Delaware, a wonderful project by the National Leadership Consortium of working with groups of 8 to 15 DSPs. And we were talking about this, and this one lady whose family came from West Africa, she's been here 25 years. She's a citizen, but she still has an accent. She's in the grocery store, little town in Delaware, and she's African American and speaks with an accent. The lady behind her, who she's never met, says, "Why the hell don't you blank, blank, blank and go home to where you came from?" This is one of the people that says she loves what she does. She loves the people that she does it for. She could go to work doing something else, make more money. And here's somebody telling her to go home to where she came from. And it just struck me what people have to put up with to do something they love. And how do we support them around that? And that becomes, this whole area of our well-being of our staff, the things that are important to them. Do we know if they have kids in school that are struggling in school? They're doing really well in school. Do they have a parent with Alzheimer's that they're struggling with? Do they have challenges that they're not comfortable talking about? How do we make this about relationships that help them grow and develop? Um, that I think is the challenge of leadership. And it's
Yeah.
not about coaching the team you wish you have. It's coaching the team you have. And, you know, I'm a big Indiana basketball fan and got a chance to meet Bobby Knight a few times. And one of his players is a dear friend of mine. And he has a son with Down syndrome. And Bobby Knight called him up. It was long after he'd played in the pros, and he was a dentist now and had a daughter with Down syndrome. And Bobby Knight called him up and said, "Don't you listen to anything those blank, blank, blank professionals tell you about your daughter. You build the best life you can for her. And if you don't, I'm going to come straighten you out." So, and he was interviewed one time. This is the point of the story. He was interviewed one time and he was asked his best job coaching. He won 3 national championships. And he said, "No, those guys are talented. They I might have helped them, but they'd have probably won it." Anyway, my best job coaching is we had a team that probably should have won 10 games, and they won 19. And we made it to the tournament, but we lost our first game.
Yeah.
But nobody ever thought they could go that far. So the idea is, as a leader, we've got to figure out what it is we can do that coach people. How do we do this? And it's hard because you get caught up in the moment and you have the
Yeah.
pressures of running the agency, the finances of an agency, the challenges that you have. Um, but find the thing that's true to you and what do you got to do? And I loved your quote from your guy of say what you mean, but then allow them to do it.
Yeah.
Don't hammer them if they make a mistake along the way too. If they try something and maybe it doesn't work. We're going to tell you to be innovative, creative, and compassionate. But the moment you step out of line, we're going to whack you upside the head.
Exactly. Yeah. So that unwritten text sometimes is is usually the much more powerful message than the placard on the wall. And
Yeah, and the things on the wall get painted over all the time. And we agonize over those slogans on the wall, right? We agonize over those things. At the end of the day, it means less than how do you treat that person that's walking by the hallway to you. You're on an important meeting you're heading to as a leader. And do you stop for a moment and have that moment with them and say, Sarah, I haven't talked to you for a long time. How are things going? What should we be doing different? What can we do to help you? What's happening at home? How's everything going? We used to be smaller. We knew everybody. Not so much anymore. And where it comes down to is leadership, and then beginning to think about in these really challenging times where there aren't a lot of answers for folks. It's a great opportunity for us to develop our own answers. What is the next big thing? It's hard, but this is an opportunity in all this chaos. Um, what could we really do differently that would make differences in people's lives? And that isn't so much wrapped in budgets as it is in creativity and approach to what we're doing. And I love what you're doing with the podcast and your work with agencies. And so after we met the first time, I just knew we wouldn't have any difficulty finding things to talk about. And
it's so true.
um,
So yeah, so I think we better land this plane. I'm richly enjoying our conversation, and I think where can people find more from you? I know you guys have a podcast, so if they're listening to this as a podcast, they probably would want to jump over there. Is it called Quillo Pod? Is that right?
it's called Quillo Pod. It's on Spotify, all the others. We are just audio only, but they can visit us at myquillo.com, learn more about what we're doing with our micro learning tools. And, it's all about creating a community. And that's what you're doing. I love what you're doing. Glad you reached out. And anything I can do to help you along the way in your work, excited to do it, Nate.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for your time today. It was a real pleasure, and many stories are going to stick with me from what you just shared, and I'm sure listeners probably feel the same way. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Wow, I say it every time, but wow, there's just so many good takeaways. Still reflecting on that, where John's talking about how culture isn't something that's shaped just in meetings or here and there, but it's every moment of every day. And that could feel like a lot of pressure, but it also could feel like an amazing opportunity to turn things in whatever direction you want to turn things. What would really serve and be best to accomplish the mission that you are setting out to do as a leader and as the organization that you were helping to serve? Well, I always try to leave you with at least one action move. I have a few. This is probably obvious. Go check out Quillo. By all means, check it out. The link will be in the show notes. So maybe it's a great fit for you. Here's another action move that you can take is why don't you try that weekly habit of calling 2 to 4 DSPs if you're in a higher leadership role. Even if you're maybe not quite as high up in leadership, just having those frequent check-ins with the people on your team is a powerful, powerful practice where people feel seen and heard and valued. And so those are just 2 easy next steps that you could take. Now, I also want to just give you a heads up. If you'd like to get a tool that identifies 7 quiet danger signs that your supervisors might be burning out their teams, this is particularly relevant when you're looking to address that early first 90-day turnover that is just a chronic issue at a lot of organizations. Then I encourage you to check out, I've got a free resource. It's at iddleader.com/supervisor. It's a simple PDF tool that's designed to help you identify maybe a few ways that the supervisors at your organization are accidentally contributing to turnover, and then what you can do to help prevent that or help turn the course on that. One other thought, it would just be, if you found this episode helpful, would you consider forwarding it to a friend by way of text or email, or a colleague? I would greatly appreciate it. There's still a lot of people that I keep hearing on a regular basis, like, I never even knew that this podcast existed, but here it is. It's a podcast all about workforce issues within the IDD world. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people I think that would still benefit from learning from John's wisdom today, and also just in general from the podcast. So anyhow, listen, you have my utmost respect. I am absolutely cheering you on. And until next time, here's to you. Keep up the amazing work.